You outside?
I am. Hopefully the wind isn't.
I can't hear it. I was working from the front porch earlier, and they were doing some sort of detection at the construction site across the street where it was just like beeping nonstop for an hour and a half.
Correct.
How's the weather out there?
It's like rainy this entire week.
Really? It's just been cloudy out here. No rain.
It was supposed to rain all week, but it's been cloudy all week, and today it's rainy. Whatever. I'll take it. The plants love it. The bees hate it. But, the bees will like it when all the flowers bloom. So our wildflowers are finally blooming. I mean, it's not impressive at all.
I went to go buy dirt yesterday for the for the garden beds, and the guy was like, you should just wait until this weekend when we can get you stuff you fill in there. He said he doesn't even plant his garden for another week or two.
Oh, really?
I was like, that's crazy. My friend on the coast is already getting food off of his plants.
That's wild. What did he mean wait till this weekend so he can...
It was to get they're expandable cocoa blocks that you put in the bottom of a garden bed to keep them from, or to have them take up space.
Oh, okay.
All right, well, Chris, today we are talking about the Space Shuttle Discovery, but the Space Shuttle Discovery was the first shuttle to dock on the International Space Station on May 29th, 1999.
Discovery is scheduled to dock with the new International Space Station. CNN correspondent Miles O'Brien joins us live to discuss this landmark rendezvous in space.
Mike, 41 hours, 18 minutes after the Space Shuttle Discovery lifted off from the Kennedy Space Center, it has found the needle in the haystack and is about 30 feet away from that fledgling International Space Station. Let's take a look at some still images.
First of all, I don't feel like 1999 was far enough away. I feel like this happened way, way, way before that. But I guess the internet only sometimes lies. Not about this. On May 27th, 1999, less than a year after the first two modules of the International Space Station, called Zarya and Unity, were connected, the Space Shuttle Discovery launched on mission STS-96. It became the first shuttle to dock with the International Space Station on May 29th. It was a logistics and resupply mission to deliver supplies to the newly assembled parts of the ISS. They also had a bunch of stuff to, a space crane. I'm interested. I don't really know what I would do with it, but a space crane sounds cool, so they delivered one of those. It launched from Kennedy Space Center in Florida and returned to Kennedy 9 days later on June 6th. It was originally scheduled to leave on the 20th and had to be postponed because of hail damage. It was determined that the tank's foam insulation couldn't be reached for repairs while it was on the pad, so they pulled the whole shuttle off, which is probably more of a hassle than it could possibly sound like to us lay people. Inspections revealed more than 650 divots in the tank's outer foam. They repaired 460 critical ones and said, that's good enough.
Just let it ride.
It's still almost 200 divots in a space shuttle. Seems significant. I don't know.
Just ride her till she dies,
So the wheels fall off, man. The crew of the mission was Commander Kent Rominger, pilot Rick Husband, EVA Specialist 1 Daniel Barry, Flight Engineer Ellen Ochoa, EVA Specialist 2 Tamara Jernigan, IV/RMS Julie Payette, and Mission Specialist Valery Tokarov. So the spacewalk that the EVA Specialist did, Daniel Barry and Tamara Jernigan, was the 45th spacewalk. It lasted 7 hours and 55 minutes.
That's wild.
That's an entire workday spent working in literal space. Sounds crazy. It was the second longest spacewalk to ever happen. Mission was completed successfully. Everything went as planned. They delivered all their food, clothes, sleeping bags, water, cranes.
So were the sleeping bags and food, was that actually outside in space? Why did that have to go through space to get inside? Was it in another capsule that had to be taken from one to the other?
There was a capsule. I'd have to look at the Wikipedia page again. it was called like Star Lab or something like that. There was a company that built capsules specifically to go in the space shuttles, and those capsules would get loaded with stuff to get taken to the ISS.
Gotcha.
But I think at this point there was like basically nobody up there. They only had like they had like the pods for it. So one came from the US and one came from Russia. Yeah, but it said, the thing I read said that the pod for this one was like 3,600 pounds of stuff.
That's a lot of stuff.
I mean, I guess it still weighs that much in space. It just doesn't have gravity doing anything about it.
So I find the first thing that I thought of is that, like, astronauts apparently report, so like space is a vacuum, right? But astronauts report that space has a really weird smell that's kind of like, they describe it as a mix of gunpowder, seared steak, raspberries, and rum, which is very specific.
Wow. Very.
But imagine getting into your sleeping bag that just went through space, and it just smells like, seared steak, raspberries, gunpowder, and rum.
Do you think when the sleeping bag gets to the space station, it smells like it's been in a plastic bin in your basement for a few months? Do you think they, like,
it smells like mothballs for sure.
Yeah.
So maybe maybe space is an improvement on mothballs.
I mean, steak and raspberries sound nice, but I don't know if I'd want to do it all the time.
So, now that I think of this, when we originally talked about this episode, there was the conversation that the space station has just always existed and has been in space forever because Y2K was forever ago, and the 90s was forever ago. But now that I think back to it, I was living in Canada in 1999, and the Canadarm2 was like Canada's big their big project on the space station, which is one of the coolest parts of the space station to me. It's not the arm itself, but that was like that was a very big deal in Canada, and people, like, there's a huge point of national pride. But this idea of international cooperation on the space station, and like even throughout times of political differences, like even now, right, with conflict in Russia and Ukraine, and like Russia recommitting to the space station, it's been one of those kind of like last bastions of unity, is this like support of safety of astronauts, and the pursuit of science is always the thing that I thought is the coolest part about it.
And I think, like, I don't know, it almost seems like, I wonder if part of it is because, like, you can't own space the way that humans feel like we can own everything on Earth. We can take it under our control. Like, how do you own the infinite abyss? The only way to go about it is to, like, work together.
I mean, not yet, right? And right. I think, like, unfortunately, and not to sound like pessimistic, but I think part of the reason that we like currently see that, like, there was this whole talk last year about Russia dropping out of the space station and building their own space station, and then recently they recommitted to the ISS, and so there's obviously this want and this need to be there and to be a part of the science that's happening. And like, I, for one, am excited for the like future, like Wild West time of space.
I feel like there are elements of that already. When, like, is there any limit to the number of Starlink satellites that are going to end up in space? There's no way to regulate that. And, if you have a private company and you have the money, who's stopping you? Yeah.
I mean, okay, let me clarify. The like radical environmentalist in me, like very much wants there to be like restrictions and wants us to do this responsibly. But, I think there's going to be really crazy stories of like space cowboys mining asteroids and, like manufacturing, in like microgravity environments in space. And I think that's not too far off. And I think it'll be absolutely fascinating. Do I think that we'll like handle it well? I'm not hopeful, but I think eventually, hopefully we get
Hopeful
there.
but realistic.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I keep thinking of like Kevin Costner in space on like an asteroid, like, was it Armageddon? Was that
Mm-hmm.
was that the movie then? Yeah, like
Yeah.
where they've got to go like blow up the asteroid.
Yeah.
But that, but like mining, just
Yeah.
a bunch of greasy miners up there.
I would love it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You think you get the 2 weeks
great.
on, 2 weeks off schedule that you get when you're like an offshore rig worker? I was in high school when this happened, which is like definitely dating myself now, but here we are. I feel like this should have been a more seminal moment in my like high school memory. Because this only happened a year after the ISS came into existence to begin with. So maybe it's just sort of that like the Mandela effect. Where you're like, no, the ISS must have been there since the 60s.
When I was really little, like what kid didn't want to go to space camp, like that was the thing. Like, and I didn't know anybody that got to go, but like everybody wanted to.
The closest you got was like the Gravitron at the fair.
Yeah. And like space was like the cool thing. So it would make sense that like the first ship docking there and then like it eventually becoming populated would be like a huge deal. But there's no flashbulb moment, like flashbulb memory that I have of that happening whatsoever.
No. There was, aside from the Canadarm, one of the women, Tamara Jernigan, was Canadian. So this was her like 5th and final flight that she did, was this mission. Maybe there were more memories surrounding that in Canada than here. We're like, oh, we always have astronauts. It's no big deal.
I think I have more memories of my best friend's uncle was an engineer for the Royal Canadian Air Force, and the Royal Canadian Air Force is not like great, but he like has his name on the like ejection seat patent, and like his job at one point was to launch frozen turkeys into jet engines to test bird strikes against geese, like jet engines against like goose strikes, because it's Canada naturally. I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. So that occupies a lot of my engineering mind.
Is there any better future job than like I get to chuck frozen turkeys into jet engines just to see what happens?
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I wonder if they're still hiring. That'll be my post-retirement job. I can gun for that in 20 years. Yeah. Do you think, would you take like would you do a private company trip to space?
This is an interesting question because I think there's a lot of different parts to it. I mean, there's part of me that is like, absolutely, like I would want to go to space, and I think that it would be one of the coolest things ever. Like from the time that I was a child, like going into space was always like the pinnacle of like exploration, right?
Yeah.
And I would love to do so. I think at like a mass scale, there's obviously huge issues with the environmental impact of it. Like, look at
Yeah.
the like last launch of the like Falcon Heavy rocket and like what that did to the like launch pad in Galveston and the surrounding area. So like scaling that up is going to be like somewhat catastrophic. If like all things equal, like if I had the opportunity, like it would be awesome.
Yeah.
I can't deny that. William Shatner loved it.
William Shatner did it. I remember they did some like in the early 2000s, and I went to this like turbo hippie college before I moved to Colorado. And it was one of those colleges where like everyone's a hippie kid, but it was a lot of like wealthy kids who went to school for adventure education. And one of the guys there hits
the classic Trustafarian grad.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we both lived in Boulder. You know exactly what one of those is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I went to school with a kid whose dad like paid to be on one of the first private space tours. I feel like being the guinea pig would not be my deal. Like I want to go after it's been well tested. Maybe just a low orbit trip. I don't need to go to Mars.
I mean, what about the jets that have been like the jetliners that have been modified to like decrease altitude at like 9.8 meters per second to mimic 0G? Like that even would be really sweet.
Yeah.
I'd be into that.
To feel like I feel like one of the biggest things everybody wants to know about space is what it feels like to be truly weightless.
Yeah.
You know, like you just want to float around.
That's a good middle ground.
I almost said JetBlue, and then I was like, that's not right. I meant Blue Origin.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure I'd trust a bargain airline trip to the space.
Not yet. Might be.
Like I said, I needed to be more tried and tested. And then sign me up, because I love a good deal.
Yeah. Your bags will end up on Mars, but that's fine.
You're like, I'm over here on Venus. When are they coming back? So something I found out when I was researching this is that every space mission since Apollo 15 has had like a NASA plays a wake-up song for them every morning. So they compile a playlist based on like songs that are meaningful to the people who are on the shuttle or to their family, stuff like that. Okay, so here's the list they had. And then I want to know what because this would be like the ultimate walkout song. It's like way better than a single baseball game. It's like, what was your walkout song to space? Okay. We've got California Dreamin' by Mamas and the Papas. Danger Zone by Kenny Loggins. Amazing.
It had to be there.
It had to be there. The themes from Star Wars by the Space Center Intermediate Band. Also, just like, obviously. How many Mos Eisley references can you make in one space trip? Morning Colors by the U.S. Coast Guard Band. Amarillo by Morning, which that one's by George Strait, and I feel like that should have been maybe closer to the end, because the next morning they woke up to Exultate Jubilate by Mozart. They were not, in fact, in Amarillo. And then they wrapped up the 9-day trip with Freebird.
It's great.
Yeah.
I love Freebird at the end.
It's what they've been yelling for all concert. Freebird. Okay, so what would your ultimate walkout song be?
I might have misunderstood the question a little bit, and thought that these were the songs that they wake up to every morning on the space station.
Just for this trip.
But just for this trip.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got a few songs that I thought would be really great songs to wake up to if you were on the space station. But there's some that could be applicable too.
Let's hear them.
I mean, one that's applicable to the trip itself is Where Eagles Dare by the Misfits. I think that's great. There's a few that are great while you're on the space station. Should I Stay or Should I Go by The Clash. I mean, that's like as you're getting ready to like wrap up, you know?
Yeah.
Don't You Forget About Me by Simple Minds. Also, Don't Forget Me Up Here, you know? Blitzkrieg Bop by the Ramones. Dancing with Myself by Billy Idol. Waiting Room by Fugazi. Friday I'm in Love by The Cure. And just if you're like, for those days that you're like really lonely up there and you're just like, you want to wake up sad, you know?
That's what The Cure's for.
You know, yeah. That was good. And then Nervous Breakdown by Black Flag. That is a good list. I really went like thematic with being like stuck on a space station, like out in the middle of space.
We didn't even get nowhere. To This is ground control to Major Tom.
Trust me, I thought about, I mean, David Bowie is sleeping right over there.
I mean, man, I only picked one song, and I don't know how I also didn't think about David Bowie prior to this, but it would be, I think, Cream by Wu-Tang.
Nice.
Think about how much money you're sitting inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. I like it a lot.
Yeah, we did spend a lot of money on this.
We just all of it, the limitless money.
Yeah.
Until they ran out that one time, but you know, no big deal.
It's fine. It's fine. They held a bake sale. They cut back on avocado toast. Look where we are now. What else? Anything else about space? I think you told me one time you can see some of the launches from where you are?
Yeah. So we're on, I mean, you know this, but we're on Carolina Beach at the like fairly southern part of North Carolina. And when SpaceX launches from Florida, we can like very clearly see the shuttle launches and see the boosters separate. You can see like where they separate and then see them start to like a little bit, like basically above the tree line, you can see the boosters separate and then start to go back down. And then the shuttle just goes like up, like off over the ocean. And it's really wild to just see. It just keeps going and going and going. Like,
you're like, it's not stopping. It's
just not going to stop. And it's odd because it creates such a giant like plume of steam behind it, but there's not like a real like sense of scale, right? Because it's obviously hundreds of miles away and hundreds of miles in the sky, but it is obviously going so fast. It's really wild. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. So it's pretty mind blowing.
Especially when like really the only frame of reference is going to be like an airplane, which obviously doesn't get fast enough to exit the stratosphere.
Yeah. And I mean, we live by, like Camp Lejeune is not far from here. So there's it's a like marine base. So there's like jets and, oh God, what are they? The, planes with the like tilt rotors, but they're like our jets flying by all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just such a different, like, it's just another league. It's crazy.
Yeah. I think the closest I've gotten is I worked at a summer camp in California, and it was just I can't remember the name of the installation that was there. It was a Air Force, but they would do I think it was around Oxnard. They would do flights that broke the sound barrier over the ocean, and you could sometimes hear it and see it. They would do it at like the right time of night, create these crazy clouds, make this insane sound. Yeah, that's as close as I've gotten. I'll have to come out there sometime.
Scared the hell out of the kids.
Yeah. Yep.
Nice.
Yeah. Give all the counselors a little laugh. Like, it's the world ending.
Better be quiet. They're coming for you.
Well, we should talk to Tasia about maybe sponsoring maybe that could be our next offsite for the team.
Yeah.
It's just an off the earth offsite.
Or at least like an adult summer camp or space camp situation.
Yeah, I mean, if we can even get one of those zero gravity flights, we'll see if it's in the budget.
Cool. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the Frontier Podcast powered by Gun.io. We drop 2 episodes per week, so if you like this episode, be sure to subscribe on your platform of choice and come hang out with us again next week and bring all your internet friends. If you have questions or recommendations, just shoot us a Twitter DM at The Frontier Pod, and we'll see you next week.